Strangelove, 2001 A Space Odyssey and A Clockwork Orange, has died at the age of 70 at his home in Hertfordshire. Stanley Kubrick was widely regarded as one of the greatest and most controversial masters of cinema. He'd just finished what was to be his last film, Eyes Wide Shut, which took 5 years to make. Our arts correspondent Nick Hyam looks back at his career.
He was a filmmaker of genius. No director has produced so many modern classics. Films like 2001, with its special effects and typically inspired use of music, delighted critics and made money. He was a self-taught filmmaker who could do every job on set. By the early 60s, when he came to Britain to make the controversial Lolita, he'd already made Hollywood hits like Paths of Glory and Spartacus. He made all his subsequent films in Britain, including the biting anti-nuclear satire Dr. Strangelove, starring Peter Sellers. In A Clockwork Orange, a gang commits rape and murder to the tune of Singing in the Rain and the music of Beethoven. The film's bleak view of the future horrified many. When it was blamed for provoking real violence, Kubrick withdrew all copies. And longer to make. Nicholson said Kubrick gave new meaning to the word meticulous.
You said we've got to get him out of here, as you got strong at the end, and I think it has to be a last desperate begging.
He was the most pernickety perfectionist you could possibly imagine. Fortunately, the films were very good, so you could say that despite his eccentricity, despite his reclusiveness, and despite the fact that he never gave interviews and kept himself in total secrecy, he was a great filmmaker, and thank God for that.
In Full Metal Jacket, he created Vietnam in London's Docklands. His reputation was such that studios gave him as much time and money as he wanted.
Start the cameras, this is Vietnam, the movie!
Anyone who has ever been privileged to direct a film also knows that although it can be like trying to write War and Peace in a bumper car in an amusement park, when you finally get it right, there are not many joys in life that can equal the feeling.
We'll have more on Stanley Kubrick later in this bulletin when we speak to the film critic John Marriott. Stanley Kubrick has died at the age of 70. In a career spanning almost 50 years, Stanley Kubrick directed a range of often controversial films, including Lolita and A Clockwork Orange. The film critic John Marriott says Kubrick's career was marked by its variety.
In terms of themes, he was very interested in the whole dehumanizing of man, of society. Whether you look at Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas, one of the great anti-war films, or A Clockwork Orange, or 2001, he was interested in men becoming mechanized, becoming machines. But unlike most directors, but unlike most actors who work well across a narrow range, he could reinvent himself stylistically to suit the subject. So I think it's not easy to pin him down to one visual style, except to say he was highly visual.
To illustrate the point you were making about dehumanizing, I think we have a clip from 2001 A Space Odyssey, which will run here.
I know everything hasn't been quite right with me. Very confidently. That it's going to be all right again.
An impressive film. If it's fair at a time like this to question a director at all, what did his films lack?
He was by nature a highly obsessive, meticulous individual. This is a polite way of saying his films were long. I mean, even a sort of pop film like The Shining, which would have been a great, slim 90-minute film, was 146 minutes long. I mean, this is quite absurd, and the film loses its way rather badly. Films like Spartacus, which had great moments in them and wonderful acting, was far too over-egged. Like all obsessors, he didn't know when to leave well alone. And I think if you look at Eyes Wide Shut, which he spent 2 years filming on the streets of London with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, 2 years making a film, it's absurd by anyone's standards.
Well, what about Eyes Wide Shut? Because had he finished it to his satisfaction before he died?
I think he probably had, because he wouldn't let anyone look at anything, even studio heads, until he was pleased. Now, have I got a fax for you? I had a fax on Friday, and according to this fax I got from the States, the executives of the studio that backed the film had seen it in a preview theatre in New York. Now, Kubrick would never have let them see it were he not ready. And this is before he died suddenly, so clearly he was ready. Being a highly secretive, protective man, he insisted that one of his gophers took the film out from England to New York and took it back on the next flight, back to his house.
Do we
This was only 2 days ago.
Do we know what the studio executives thought?
Not yet. I'm sure he wouldn't let them speak. They may now speak, of course.
Well, he did have almost unprecedented freedoms from studio interference, didn't he? How did he manage that?
Well, he made, I mean, his early films didn't make a lot of money. The Killing was a very good film, gave him instant critical kudos. And Paths of Glory as well with Kirk Douglas, one of the great war films, certainly one of the great anti-war films ever. But when he made Dr. Strangelove, he really hit the mother lode. I mean, that picture made a ton of money. No small coincidence, of course, that Peter Sellers was the star, playing 3 roles. So that made him a lot of money. But he was, you know, studios always want to make money, but they also like prestige. If they have a big shot prestige director attached to them, who will occasionally lose a lot and now and again make something, it helps them for PR reasons.
Redeems the industry's reputation.
He would not let studios not let him be free, let's put it that way. This is another way of saying he wasn't an easy man to get on with.
Why did he adopt the United Kingdom? Because he ended up shooting all his movies here, never leaving the country.
He got fed up with Hollywood, but instead of just sort of, you know, complaining quietly and smiling at the right executives, he told them where to go and moved over here.
Film critic John Marriott.